Good morning, Year 12s. This is just I'll start with the recap of object-oriented programming. So you should remember object-oriented programming has got 4 pillars as I've shown on this slide. It is abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance. So abstraction is the same as in any programming language. It's hiding the non-essential details and just showing what is essentially important to the user. Okay, so you have to think about class in itself is the abstracted form, abstracted data structure. All the non-essential details are hidden from the user, so user doesn't need to know what methods or what functions are being used, or the user doesn't need to know what kind of variables, or as we call for classes. Can you remember what they're called? No? Okay. So you should try to remember what they're called. Okay. So what are the variables that are being used? So you need to cover them under a hood or a class and then go ahead creating it. So that's basically abstraction process. Encapsulation is wrapping the data. So abstraction and encapsulation work hand in hand. So when you are encapsulating the code and the data it manipulates together, so the attributes, there I said it. So the attributes, if you didn't remember from the last time, so the attributes and the methods, when they are taken together, it is called encapsulation. Encapsulation leads to abstraction. Okay. And the third is polymorphism. I will be showing you some examples of polymorphism. So polymorphism is basically another way to reuse any code in a class. And specifically, a method of a class is being reused. So Java or any other object-oriented programming language supports this in a way where you can name the method exactly the same name. However, you can override them by declaring different outcomes or different parameters. Okay. And inheritance is, again, it leads to a reuse of the code. Inheritance is, as the word says, inheritance, it is mechanism by which one superclass can pass on its own attributes, its own methods to a class below it, or like a child can take the attributes from a parent. So the child class gets all the attributes from the parent, or the parent class, in other words, the parent class passes its features to its child class. Child class can have further its own features or its own methods, but when it inherits, it can reuse some or all of the methods and attributes from the parent class. I hope this will all make sense when we start giving you some examples. So from this point on, rather than going through this PowerPoint, I will be going through another one where it is, which is the programming column. Right, so as I promised, we have moved on to the programming concepts. I have uploaded this onto Google Drive, as you can see. So rather than spending more time on the software development T3, spend some time on this. Both these two PowerPoints go hand in hand. So the first one gives you the concept about object-oriented programming, but as important as learning the concepts is, you can only learn by practice. So this one is from the programming, I think techniques, yes, programming techniques, and you will be learning, as you have been doing, actually putting them into practice. I have also put some Python programs along with it so that you can essentially see the difference between the Java program and the Python program. So this will, we have already learned about classes, objects, methods, and attributes. So today you will be learning more about inheritance, encapsulation, and polymorphism. You will be learning how to write pseudocodes. The best way to go about this is to learn about the pseudocode, is to go through First of all, write the program so that you become confident in writing programs. And then it's a bit of reverse engineering. Try and write the pseudocode. Okay. Refer back to your program OCR guide, OCR pseudocode guide for anything, how to write pseudocode about classes. And you will be drawing some inheritance diagrams as well. So we have covered that. What is object-oriented programming? I'm going to skip this. I've also covered what are classes. It's like a blueprint for an object where all the attributes and methods together, chunked up together, they form a class. Okay. So a car, for example, is a class. A car will have the attributes of its color, number of seats, what kind of, is it manual or is it automatic, and other attributes like its height, maybe weight, what kind of engine it has, etc. Okay, you're not limited to what attributes you can define. You have to look at the problem and then decide what kind of attributes you need for that class. So it's very similar to any program that you would do. And then obviously the method can be driving, the car can be driven, the car can be parked, the car can be serviced. So these can be the attributes. Okay. So now they are referring to a very simple class called dog. So you can suggest some attributes and methods for the class named dog. Think about it. What can be the methods and the attributes? That was in this video. Okay, so some of the attributes and methods for dog could be its name, color. If it is rescue dogs, people it has rescued, and some of the methods can include: it can dig, it can search, bark, it can eat, whatever it is. Okay. So programmer will also need methods to set and get attributes. So these are something very much in Python, the set and get methods attributes. In Java, you create constructors. Okay. So the constructor methods is to basically give the attributes a starting value. Okay. So these are the values you start with, the attributes. That is how your class has the object. When you create an object for a class, that is how the attributes will look like. Next, when you are getting the attributes, means you're just simply looking at what are the values of the attribute. It's like printing an input, but in case of class, printing is getting the attributes and input statement is like setting the attributes. You're not using print and input. Instead, to set and get the attributes of a class, you are using the get and set methods. Remember, this is mainly useful for Python. Okay, but in your spec, you have to remember this. So ensure you are practicing the get and set method on Python as well. So this is how a pseudocode in Python sort of way looks like for the class dog. So private name, private color means the term private means that it cannot be looked at or accessed outside the class. Only a method or a procedure in the class is able to get it. Pause the video. If you can write this class in Python, then try to create an object and try to access the attribute name from the main program. Then you will see what I'm talking about. Okay. Next is public and private. So there is worksheet 1. I will be giving you that as well. You will be doing the question 1 for definition of the dog class, and that will be useful for you to actually create the class and see how it all works. Okay. So attributes are normally declared as private. it's always declared as private unless somebody wants the attribute to have any public to be publicly accessed, in which you can change it to public, but by default it is always private. Now, encapsulation, as I've said before, is hiding the methods and attributes in the class definition, hiding the details of implementation from the user. So when you're creating the class, you are basically encapsulating the methods and the attributes together under the class. Okay. So how do we create a new object? Once you have created a class definition, which is going by the pseudocode, you would be creating a new object by writing the object name here, which is my dog is the object name, and new dog is the you're creating a new instance of a class. This is also called a constructor. So remember, whenever you have done from the last lesson, when you write new, the keyword new, it basically means you are now calling the constructor class, constructor method, which means you want the my dog to have attribute Fido and the color is black. So going back to this one, have a look at this procedure. So public procedure new, my name and my color. Okay. So they have named the new constructor. It always has to be new. It can't have any other name. You should always have it as new, because that defines, that's a keyword for any language, showing that it is a constructor method and not any other method. So you have got my name and my color. These are the attributes or parameters. What is it? Right? It is parameters. You're passing the parameters. Okay. Now, what they have done is now used these, the name and color, which are private properties or private attributes of the class, to assign the value, whatever you have passed from your main function called my name. They have been assigned to both these attributes. So going back to this one now. So for example, this is the line you would be writing in the main program. So my dog 1 equals new dog is the first object. New dog, my dog 1 has got the attribute of Fido. It's called Fido, and then it's got the color black. Next one is Bonnie and Golden. You have to now, you are calling the method for this object. So my dog 1, which is Fido, have to bark 3 times. Now, what does it show under bark? So it has got the procedure bark, has taken the parameter of bark times, which is 3, and it will just print 3 times. Okay. Now, in this, you have done my dog 1, which is Fido, will bark 3 times. You can then have my dog 2 can bark only once, which means you are using the same method bark, but by passing different variables for different objects, you are making it act differently for your 2 different objects. So basically, this is the concept that is also used in a lot of programs, mainly in gaming. Think of that. How would you use, pause the video, think, how can you use a class in gaming? A very good hint is you create the same type of object. Say, for example, a shooter is shooting the enemies. All the enemies are from the same class. Can you create an enemy class, and can you create a shooter class? Go have a try at this. Okay. And then in the next video, I will be explaining polymorphism and inheritance in greater detail.